out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a weekend. What a weekend it was. We here in my neck of the woods went to the big march on Saturday. Hundreds of people out in the streets partaking in a march on a sweltering hot day. It was one of those moments where you go, you know what, this is what's going to make America great. This is what's going to make us better. This is what's going to make us good. This is going to take us back to reality and to the America that I grew up with. Not the hate, not the anger, not the idiocy that we see coming out of this White House and their trolls, but actually people active, engaged, and ready to fight for a better tomorrow for all of us. Now, just before I came on, someone sent me a Gallup poll, and I really hate all of the things that we poll for. It's really, really frustrating that everything now has a poll, and evidently since 2001, we're now in the post 9/11 world. We have to prove our love of our country, and we have to not just prove that we love our country, but we have to really love our country. But evidently Gallup has been doing this poll since 2001, where they ask Americans if they're proud to be an American. And if so, if you're proud, how proud? Are you extremely proud? Are you very proud? Are you somewhat proud? Or not really so much? This year, first year since 2001, under 50% of people, in fact, 47% of respondents responded extremely proud. That is down from 54% when we were really, and it was, really down from 2003 when 70% of us were extremely proud. So, and again, I hate these jingoistic kind of, we have to declare our proudness of our love. Is this the Trump legacy? Is this the dividing? Because you look along party lines, they point out that 32% of Democrats said that they were extremely proud, while 74% of the Republican folk said that they were. 44% of women folk, they're extremely proud. That dropped from 51% just last year. Non-white folks, not so proud. Just 33%, and for good reason. If you look at what's been going on. So there you go. We're not proud. And I guess, after looking at what happened this weekend, I would put myself in both the extremely proud category because of all of the people I saw out in the streets, all of the people who were there selflessly to help others, all of the people who were taking time of their Saturday, and it was hot. It was really, something else would have been better. But people were out there because, you know what? This isn't the country that we grew up believing in. And I would say right there, extremely proud of those folks. Now you go to the other side of this and you look at what some of the, I guess there were a handful of nutsies over at the Capitol in Harrisburg having their little thing. I couldn't find any. They had disappeared. Maybe it was a little too hot there. There was, according to my daughter, one person sitting under a tree near the Capitol steps, but not in nutsy garb like I was expecting. But, some of the other crazies over the weekend, not so proud of these Americans, like the one Republican candidate in North Carolina who wrote that Jews are all descendants from Satan, and basically asked what's wrong with being a white supremacist. Also, a talk radio guy, this guy, and I'm not going to say his name, but some crazy guy, Deagle, I guess, kind of rhymes with Beagle. He said that he would basically shoot anybody who protests near him. If they want to harass us, they're going to get death. Yeah, that's not quite how this works. And I can't tell you how many of those responses I got from people. Well, Maxine Waters wants people to harass all these Trump politicians. And I go, there's a difference between, walking up to somebody having lunch and asking them to resign, as the woman did yesterday, I guess it was today, to Scott Pruitt, and someone walking into a newspaper and shooting a bunch of people. There is a huge difference between the two. And for instance, in Alabama, there was a rally, like I went to on Saturday, where this I guess counter protester, there was one there. Evidently he caused a panic when he whipped out a gun and threatened the entire crowd, which you got to go, probably a guy who should never had a gun to begin with and should never have one again. And you look at the picture of him and you go, yeah, okay, I get it. You look at in Idaho, for instance, there was a Republican state rep who evidently, freaked out everybody at this students rally for gun control when she asked if any of the kids would like to see an empty 30 millimeter shell. Got it in a truck. And the thing that bothers me is these stories there's tons of them. We could spend entire day of idiocy and what people are throwing out on Twitter and on Facebook. And again, I'm still a firm believer in that every person should have to be verified. That's your name, it's who you are, so that when you say something stupid, someone can call you on it. Instead of just, I got 12 followers and just fired up the account last month. Yeah, we know who you are. But anyway, you've got a president who's come out and said, my base is doing great. Love my base. Praising the crazy. And evidently warned to the other side, the other side of America, that you better just take it easy because we got guns. He didn't say that. I'm adding that. But that's what was implied. And the thing is I've had these conversations with friends over the years that the left had better start buying guns, because the right's been stockpiling for years. They fantasize about a civil war. And evidently, there's a civil war going to happen on July 4th. I didn't even know about it. I didn't even get the memo. The Democrats are going to start a civil war. No one sent me the memo. Because I got plans on the 4th of July. I can't be involved in a civil war. And, it takes preparation, takes time. You're going to need to pack a backpack. You're going to need, water bottles for the kids. You're going to need to, bring snacks because people are going to get tired. If evidently Alex Jones believes there's going to be a civil war. And I guess the funny part of this is none of the Democrats knew about it. And this is the kind of insanity that keeps fueling the right wing of this country. Because you've got the Alex Joneses of the world who are just carnival barkers who have figured out how to enrage the outraged and figured out how to profit off of their dim mentality. And he's whipping them into a frenzy. And there's a point at which this honestly and truthfully, and while it's funny, that the Democrats are going to start a civil war on the 4th of July, the deadly reality is there's someone out there that heard that, saw that, read that, and actually believes it, and has actually internalized it, and is right now, as we speak, digging up all of the guns and the rice. Because I actually know 2 people who they've told me that all around the area where we live, they have shortwave radio equipment, they have guns, and they have rice buried all over the place. Let that sink in for a minute. And oh, by the way, they're somewhat, I hate to say sane. I hate to use the rational. But policy-wise, you can have a conversation with them. Now imagine the gun nuttery beyond them. Because they're gun nuts. And look, one of the guys was nice enough to take me shooting, and he was, it's fun to, shoot bottles and plates and targets and all that stuff. It's a fun hobby. But in their mind, they're prepping for, it's coming. The Civil War is going to come, and it's going to be the well-prepared and the armed. And, we went through this during the 80s as well. And, of course, the 90s, and again, in the 2000s, and now again in the 2010s, where you've got these militia types, these end-timers who are prepping for the end of the world. And they're going to be now it's the holy warriors. Then it was just the anti-government militiaman folks, your extremists who are, running around in the woods playing soldier. And I would argue, as I did back then, there were a number of them that they couldn't get in the military. This is as close as they could get. They're fantasizing for when all hell breaks loose and they get to shoot people in the streets. And you've got a president, and this is the scary part of this. And we've never had this in my lifetime. You have a president who is stoking that fire. You have a president who is adding fuel to that. All because his personality is someone who likes chaos. I truly believe he would like nothing more than to see a riot or a mass uprising that he could send the National Guard or the military into, that they could force, a governor to send the National Guard into, or send the military into crush. I truly believe that nothing would make him happier. And that's something that's really scary when you talk about a president. Because if you look at some of the responses that we get, on Twitter to some of the, things that, we put out, some of it's obviously, trolls who are, either bots or just, dim. And I guess you play that game every day. In fact, I threw it out today. Someone made a comment and I threw it out. So let's play today's, Twitter bot or brain dead. And, make your choice. But the sad reality is every time you turn around, they're there. And they're constantly hammering away. And they're emboldened by the Orange Menace. So if Robert Mueller's out there, please, quickly, start moving. So there's a lot to get to today. Michael Cohen evidently had some things to say today, whether you buy, he's looking for a deal or he's looking to flip. We'll talk about that. Also going to answer some of the right-wing questions on immigration. MS-13 just around the corner. Lots and lots to get to. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Pennsylvania State Representative Chris Rabb is going to be here to share some of his thoughts about the big event on Saturday and talk about what we can do to be moving in the forward direction. Quick break. Right back.
10% of the people own 90%. Yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day known as the East St. Louis Race Riot. It is considered the worst case of labor-related violence of the 20th century and one of the worst race riots in American history. At the time, East St. Louis, Illinois, was an industrial hub along the Mississippi River across from St. Louis, Missouri. Production demands for World War I intensified the Great Migration. As African Americans emigrated from the South, filling the demand for industrial labor, tensions grew at workplaces and in the communities in which they settled. That spring, black and white workers had been hired to scab on a local strike. The violence began on May 28th when trade unionists marched to the mayor's office protesting the black labor they considered unfair competition. It quickly turned into an anti-black riot. The National Guard was called out to quell the violence. And on this day, 2 days of rioting began when a car of white men drove through a black neighborhood and fired at a group of blacks. Racist mobs killed as many as 200 African Americans. 6,000 more were left homeless. Many remarked bitterly that the police and National Guard stood by, indifferent to the race violence around them. The president of the Illinois Federation of Labor insisted that employers were to blame for using Southern blacks to break the back of labor. Socialist Party leader Eugene V. Debs declared that the riots were, quote, a foul blot upon the labor movement. Debs continued, had the labor movement freely opened their doors to the Negro instead of barring him, the atrocious crime of East St. Louis would have never blackened the pages of American history. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
The world keeps telling me to get a grip or I won't last. Gotta break away from solitude and let go of my past. I've never found it easy to change my stubborn ways or to gain perspective, throw away those soulless days. We have struggled, we have prayed, we're still searching for something more. We have struggled, we still pray, we're looking for the chance to be free.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So a fake quote running around on Twitter and Facebook, evidently being credited to Maxine Waters. Multiple radio stations have also thrown this out, pushing the fake quote out on air. It's June 28th is when it went out. A Twitter account at CNN Politics, which is a parody account of CNN. They tweeted out, Rep. Maxine Waters, the next Supreme Court justice should be an illegal immigrant. And yes, there were people who bought that a sitting member of Congress would tweet that out. Now, the tweet also included the fake CNN chyron at the bottom saying Waters' SCOTUS pick should be a legal immigrant. And the heads on the right wing went boom. Evidently, the Twitter account has been suspended. But it's one of those things where the dim and the trolls, they took right to it. Because, you know, they got the finger moving and they got to say she hates America. Hates America. And I got tons of that kind of stuff over the weekend. I'm here to share some thoughts on the weekend's events and talk about the great speech that he gave. I've asked Pennsylvania State Representative Chris Rabb to come talk with us. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Glad to be on.
So first and foremost, good on you. Good speech you gave on Saturday, coming to Harrisburg and participating in the march there. Good on you.
Thank you. Generally speaking, when I'm invited, I come.
Yeah, I've got that same kind of thing. So what brought you from Philadelphia to Harrisburg? Why did you choose to be at that rally?
Well, I mean, quite literally, I was asked. And I don't take these invitations lightly. I was the only elected official there as far as I know, the only one in the state legislature. I've been on the job 19 months, and I'm a Justice Democrat. And there was an outcry. There was a feeling for affirmation from stakeholders across the Commonwealth and in different capacities. And as someone in the state legislature who speaks out on these issues, they wanted my voice, and I was happy to share. And it was good to be in the company of those people who believe in what I consider, conservative, old-fashioned values about keeping families together. So it was an easy thing for me to say, yeah. And granted, it was 100 miles away, really hot, but, it's a small sacrifice to make to be on the right side of history.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because I got hit all day on Saturday with people saying, well, you'll go out in the 100-degree heat and you'll fight for the illegal kids, but you won't fight for inner city youths. You won't fight for black kids. You won't fight for homeless children. What's wrong with you people?
Well, I'm confused. Who are these people who don't fight for poor kids? Or aren't you from the project?
I actually am, yes.
So I don't get that narrative. For people who use that critique, these are the same people who can't walk and chew gum. We have to do many things. We have to fight many battles. And the fact that we have folks who do not come from these countries where folks were undocumented, seek to flee war-torn zones that have been largely destabilized by awful American foreign policy. How is it that we can embrace their humanity and also work to help people in our own backyard? Why are the two mutually exclusive? That's a non-starter for me.
Yep. And what I kept throwing back is it's amazing how you've now found this. Now you seem to care about black inner city youth. You now seem to care about homeless children. You now seem to care about the poor, while supporting Republican policies that have made those situations worse. And yet, never heard anything out of you before. Welcome to the club. Welcome now. Let's move forward. Make sure we can do those things. But don't throw that out now as you expect to be the talking point that stops people from being on the right side of history.
That's absolutely right. And these are the same people who don't have the courage or the decency or the wisdom to connect the dots between the fact that our fates are intertwined, our histories are intertwined. When we talk about oppression, when I speak, and I was one of the few African American folks at that rally, I don't, and I said it in my remarks. I wasn't there because my people come from Central America, or I'm a Spanish speaker, or that I'm new to this country. My people have been here for generations. There are no immigrants in my family. All my family descend from people of African descent and the people who raped them before then, some of whom were signers of the Declaration of Independence. So when I speak and I lend my voice, it's not to compete in terms of who is oppressed more. It was to say, I stand in common cause with you because all of our fights are relevant. All of our fights are intertwined as we move toward justice. We have to embrace all of these journeys and all of these perspectives. They want us to be divided. And the reality is they get nervous when they see us coming together, when they see white folks, working class white folk coming together with black folks, coming together with undocumented Pennsylvanians, coming together with Native Americans. I mean, it drives them crazy, and it is a delight because they fear their own demise, because the reality is they are dying and we are growing strong. And the we, of course, is a diverse America that believes in justice for all.
And, the thing is, and this is, one of the things I was talking about over the weekend, is that, the wealth class of this country, the ones who want us divided, are masterful at pitting us against one another. Whether you're white, black, Latino, whatever, white collar, blue collar, green collar, pink collar, ring around the collar, whatever. They've been masterful at subdividing us into categories and then pitting us against one another so that we kind of eat our own and we're not paying attention to them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We can't fall for that. And I think more and more folks are realizing the bait and switch that has really kind of taken hold of this country. But we are in the majority. And we also have the benefit of, for those of us who care about history, to learn the lessons of history and to see what worked and to see what is being repeated that we can't fall for. So
let me ask you this, because the other attack that comes, and I'm sure you've heard it, outside of "you don't care about Americans," is the MS-13s coming to get us, and that all of these kids were not, snatched from their mother's bosom or from their father's arms, but no, they were being child trafficked by MS-13, and they were gonna use these infant 3-month-old babies into the sex trade, and you're a horrible human being for being on their side. I'm curious your thought.
So these people are worried about Central American gangs. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, because Trump put it in their ear.
What about the gangs we have here? What about the gangs who are involved in all kinds of gun violence in cities across the country, who are using guns from the same manufacturers that these same folks adore? What are they doing to ice them out? What are the concerns they have about how we have domestic terrorism by folks who are using military-grade weapons against children? Where are they? Are they marching to keep our kids safe in Philadelphia, in Harrisburg, and Reading, and Pittsburgh, and Chicago, et cetera? Where are they? I don't see them. They don't care about black or brown folks. They care about their own self-preservation, and they use a really bastardized form of the Constitution to justify their racism.
Well, they'll tell you that, Chris. They'll tell you that. They're original intentists. They believe in the original intent of the Constitution, which means you're only 3/5 a person and my wife can't vote.
And they should only have, so that means that they can only use muskets then too, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at the Second Amendment. And I'm not sure if you knew, but I introduced, or rather I intend to introduce a bill that would look at the Second Amendment very differently in our state. It would call for a state militia, a well-regulated militia.
I've been calling that for years. I want to read the whole sentence, read the whole thing, not just a piece of it.
Exactly. And so my proposed bill would create a well-regulated militia, but that militia would be created to promote broad wellness and well-being, to promote community wealth building, to promote public safety and public health that addresses trauma, that addresses these issues that affect so many of us, and it brings people together. That's what I want to do. I want to reinvent how we define militia for the betterment of the Commonwealth.
And tie it into public service, sure. Now, while they're out doing public service and they're out doing the good that you have in mind, will they all be carrying AR-15s and military-grade weapons just in case? Because, hey, MS-13 might be just around the corner.
I think we have no lack of weaponry out there. What we need, when everything, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
Yep.
There are better ways of addressing gun violence and all of these issues that plague really the most disconnected in society. And it's not with more guns. It's not with more guns. And it doesn't mean that they can't be trained in using firearms, but that's not what's going to solve the problem. If that were true, we'd be the safest country in the world because we have the most guns. We have more guns than Americans in this country. And we have the highest number of people locked up in the entire world. We're not particularly safe in this country. So their logic just does not add up.
Yeah, but we're number one, Chris. We're number one at something, right? Even if it is in incarceration, even if it is in the number of guns and the people who believe in angels, and go down the list of the things. We're at least number one in something. I mean, because none of the things that really matter, household income, infant mortality, health care, retirement security, none of those things we're number one in. But hey, we can sure kill people and lock them up.
Absolutely. I think we need to just really look deep within and decide, what do we really want to be number one at? What is really meaningful? And I think that's a hard internal conversation for a lot of people because they've embraced a very challenging fiction. And when they realize it's fiction, they go nuts. And we need to take a step back and say, what is most important? And for those folks who don't side on the side of justice, for folks who don't really believe in the deep humanity. I don't know what to tell those folks. You know,
there's no reaching them. I believe they're fives. You let them go. Look, I was looking for some of the nutsies who were supposedly over on the Capitol steps, who had their little rally as a kind of a counter rally, I guess, and I didn't see any. But I was looking for them because I wanted to have that discussion.
They might have been snowflakes, but they got melted by the heat.
Well, there is that, because my daughter said there was somebody sitting under one of the trees, and I wasn't going to get out and go hike up there to find out if they were one of them. I wanted to see a crowd. But the thing is you have to let them go. In my view, you just let those folks go. You're never going to reach them. Let them go, and the rest of us as society have to move on without them.
Well, that's not a real sacrifice for me. So you're preaching to the choir. But I have to work with folks in the state legislature. I'm one of
you got Daryl Metcalf.
I don't have to represent it.
I don't know how you don't strangle Daryl Metcalf. Just kind of throwing that out there.
I go with humor because that keeps me sane. Some people drink. I go with humor.
Okay.
And if I didn't have that, I would be I'd be beneath the jail right now. That's
I'd be touching him all the time. I'd be slapping him on the back, rubbing his arm.
Well, see, the thing is, though, he's one of the he's allegedly one of the people who packs heat on the House floor. So when a white supremacist sympathizer threatens me after a committee meeting by saying, this conversation would be very different on the street, I take that seriously not because I'm afraid of him, but he's crazy enough to pull out his weapon on me, and I don't carry. So if it's, that's a real problem.
Yeah,
right?
no.
We can say he's crazy. We can say he's right wing. That's fine. I have colleagues who I get along real well with who are hardcore right wing. We get along fine, but they're not threatening me, and I don't believe that they're carrying a piece. And in Harrisburg, in the Capitol, there are legislators who are carrying firearms on the House floor, and I think that's problematic. One is it's illegal, and so these are the same folks who say, well, this is the nation of laws. Well, except for that concealed weapon you're carrying in your cowboy boots. But when folks who are fleeing war-torn countries, who are fleeing domestic violence, who are fleeing all these things, natural disasters, et cetera, in great because a lot of this has to do with what I said earlier before about really problematic American foreign policy. And they come here for a better life, just like a lot of white Europeans came over generations before. They're illegal. What they're doing is wrong because they didn't follow the law. But it's interesting what laws people choose to reference and what they choose to ignore. Jaywalking is illegal. Speeding is illegal. And there are laws that shouldn't be still on the books. In Pennsylvania, a 14-year-old girl can marry a 40-year-old man. Up until recently, a man could rape his wife, but because she's the spouse, it's not considered rape. In Pennsylvania, a police officer can sexually assault someone in custody, and then if it goes to trial, that person's charged, he can say, oh, well, she consented, and that can be affirmative defense in the state of Pennsylvania right now. So I don't want to hear people talking about, oh, illegal and such. The reality is brave people over many generations, over many centuries, have said these laws are unjust and we're fighting against them. And I would not be where I am if that were not the case. For abolitionist movements that said slavery is immoral and it cannot stand. I feel very strongly about fighting against laws that should not remain on the books.
Good for you. Let me ask you last kind of line of questioning, because the other bit that I get is, well, how many people should we let in? Is there a limit? Should there be borders? Should we have immigration checkpoints? If you're just going to defend these children, just let them all in. And then look, these are the same people who say when you want to raise the minimum wage, why not just make it $1,000 an hour? I mean, it's a ludicrous thing, but you get these comments quite often, and I'm curious your thought.
Well, I'm curious, is this before or after they eat grapes and mushrooms and lettuce and strawberries? Is this before or after they go to a hotel? Is this after they eat chicken? Right, all of the things that they take for granted, the pricing, that comes from undocumented workers. You remove that part of the workforce, and all of a sudden the prices go up significantly. That doesn't seem to enter into any of their conversation. Now, I find that really, really convenient when they don't have a problem with folks who are kind of the invisible workforce that keeps prices down. But I also don't see them going after those jobs. Are they working for sub-minimum wages? So who's the real culprit here? To me, it seems the corporations who get away with this. Why is there no scrutiny of those corporations?
No, I'm with you. I've often said that the first thing we should be doing when you make an immigration raid, you start with the CEO.
Absolutely. It rings hollow when folks talk about closing the borders and such, when in fact our economy feeds off of this type of labor, and it's always been the case, right? I mean, this has always been the case. It starts with the original sin of this country, with slavery. That's unpaid labor, right? That benefited everybody, even Northerners who were nowhere near slavery, although there was slavery in New York. I have ancestors who were enslaved in Manhattan. So it's all connected. And if you don't see how your faith, how the denigration of others has benefited from you just because of the body you inhabited, then you're not seeing the whole picture. And if you're not wanting to see the whole picture, you're not really ready to have a real grown-up conversation.
No, they're not ready. This is about a political win. I actually believe there are some people who go back and forth on my Twitter account who don't even care about the issue. It's about the win.
Absolutely.
And that, to me, that's the worst place we can be. When you're no longer talking about the actual issue, it's only about my team against your team. That's a real problem. And something that has to be addressed. But Chris, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing your thoughts. And again, good on you for Saturday's speech and showing up and being all of that, and helping us move this forward.
Well, I appreciate the compliment, and just in case there was any doubt about where I stood, today I went to Berks County Detention Center. So we were talking about what happened at the southern border and tearing families apart. But when they try to reunify them, we have to look at the business models that local, state, and federal governments are embracing that profit off of misery by putting families together in detention centers. And families belong together, but they don't belong in virtual cages. And so I toured the Berks County Detention Center, and I can say even more strongly that Berks County Detention Center needs to be closed, and we need to release these detainees to their families or other sponsors and let them go through the proper channels for those who seek asylum.
Yeah, and what are they doing in Pennsylvania from the southern border is a whole nother question. And the other thing is, real quick, is you got the judge saying they've got a system for cataloging cell phones, but no system for cataloging whose children got snatched. Something seriously wrong. But Chris, I appreciate the time. Love to have you back again as this continues, and I know it will.
My pleasure.
Good stuff. Pennsylvania State Representative Chris Rabb. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Share your thoughts on were you at the big rally? Did you participate? Love to hear it. rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
All of my life I've searched for clarity. I have wrestled with two paths buried deep inside of me. I lost some rounds, been knocked around, felt my share of defeat. Yet somehow I've always managed to get back on my feet.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1822. That was the day that Denmark Vesey was hung for his role in allegedly plotting a slave rebellion in South Carolina. Vesey had been born into slavery in St. Thomas in the Caribbean. From there, he was brought to Charleston, South Carolina. He won the lottery and was able to purchase his freedom at the age of 32. Now a free man, Vesey worked as a skilled carpenter. He became a founder of a black congregation of the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston. 4 years after it opened, authorities grew uneasy about the potential of the church to foster unrest among those under slavery. In response, they closed the church. Vesey and others began to organize black resistance to slavery. An informant revealed the plans before the uprising could take place. South Carolina authorities acted swiftly. Vesey stood trial and was found guilty. He was executed along with 35 of his supporters. The AME Church was burned to the ground. Hysterical white leaders passed harsh new slave codes aimed at thwarting any future plots. Since his death, historians have debated the true extent of the plot and the evidence put forth at his trial. Vesey's name became a rallying cry in the fight against slavery. The church members continued to meet in secret. After the Civil War, the church formally took the name Emmanuel AME. The church became a symbol in the fight for black civil rights. In 2015, a white 21-year-old gunman murdered 9 people at the Emmanuel Church in a vicious hate crime.
Moses said, "Let my people go. If not, I'll smite your firstborn dead. Let my
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Yes, leaving town. Evidently, they're throwing Alan Dershowitz off of Martha's Vineyard. Or, I'm sorry, it's like McCarthyism on the Vineyard. And I can't decide which is more ridiculous. The fact that Alan Dershowitz is out there whining and complaining because his yuppity friends are shunning him for his support of Donald Trump, or that he wants us to know he has a house on Martha's Vineyard. I don't know which is worse. To show what kind of elitist, poor little Alan is. And look, I don't feel at all sorry for him. Sorry, not even a little bit, considering most working people in this country can't even get onto Martha's Vineyard. Just is what it is. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So any sympathy for Alan?
No, I haven't. I've been on other stories here. I didn't see what happened with that.
Yeah, he just said it's like McCarthyism on the island. All of his friends are shunning him.
All because of some of his positions recently, you mean?
Yeah, when you're on the wrong side of history, people tend to not want to be around you, and I understand that.
Well, he's taken. I've followed him, as everyone has for years. And I guess I started to get surprised about a year ago. All of a sudden, people changing, opinions and things. But it seems after Trump, I think, got elected, it was a little bit more change of opinion, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like a little Kool-Aid, maybe a little dementia. I don't know which. But a decidedly hard right turn.
Mm-hmm.
At least it appeared to me. And look, I know there's some people
especially for Dershowitz,
Yeah, I mean, but anyway, I'm not feeling sorry for him. Not even a little bit, considering what this administration's doing and getting away with. Big story today. The big story, obviously, people are reading an awful lot into Michael Cohen's interview with George Stephanopoulos. Curious your thoughts. Is this the signaling of that he's open to flipping, or is this, as a lot of us believe, the signaling of, hey, Donald, you better get the pardon stuff going soon, because I'm not waiting long.
Well, it could be one of, either one of those, but I wasn't, look, when I first read the news story this morning, preparing news, right, I read the quotes, and I understand the initial thought about the news. This is a man that
said that he would jump off of a building for Donald Trump. This is the man that would take a bullet for Donald Trump. Then all of a sudden he says, family, country first. That's not what grabbed me at all. At all. I read further into the news stories, and what really stood out was not what he said, but the fact that his lawyers and Trump's lawyers are no longer talking.
Yep.
Now,
he's got himself a new lawyer.
I know what that means because, I got into it with the Attorney General of the United States, and I had co-defendants, and we didn't talk to each other, but our lawyers talked. And when our lawyers stopped talking, for whatever reason, whether we stopped talking to their lawyers or they stopped talking to us, then something was up. So the big part of this, Rick, is the fact that the lawyers aren't talking anymore. That tells me that Cohen's lawyers are saying, you're on your own. We've got to deal with this. We don't want to relay any more information between the lawyers, which is, that's a sign in itself.
No,
and I'm sure the government's squeezing him, threatening with 30, 40, 50 years.
And this new lawyer that he's got, this Petrillo, was, a former, federal prosecutor, once led the criminal division there in Manhattan for the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is somebody who knows how the wheels work. And I think he's trying to finagle him out of it.
This is who you hire. I hired 2 former prosecutors. One was an assistant to Ken Starr at one point in time, and the other was a former prosecutor for the Department of Justice. That's who you hire because they know the system. They tried to prosecute people, and when the lawyers stop talking, then that's a big sign. So I think that Cohen, is on his own, and his lawyers want him to be on his own and want him disconnected from the Trump organization. But again, it could be a signal too, to say, hey, now I will tell you this, if they're squeezing him to go after him for Stormy Daniels and non-related Russian things, there'll be a problem, and my friends don't like to hear this, but there'll be a problem to indict the president, even if the president lied on television, because unless you are deposed, then it's not a perjury offense. It's
right. He wasn't under oath.
Trump is what I'm saying.
No, you're right. I mean, and you're right. But he wasn't under oath when he said that on TV. So it was just one of those things. It's when you get under oath.
Right, correct. And friends of mine say, no, that's impeachable lying. No, if that was the case, there'd be a lot of people not in public office today for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, excellent point. So where are you reading this? Because at first I went, well, maybe this is the sign that this new lawyer. Because I read the bottom of the story like you did, that said he got the new lawyer, and my mind's going, well, the new lawyer is trying to figure out, how to get him the best deal and keep him out of prison. Because it appears that the president is just next shunned him on down the road. You're on your own, cut him off to die kind of thing.
Look, no one was closer to Donald Trump than Cohen, and he's a lawyer, and they raided his office, and they have things, and then he was involved in the Stormy Daniels thing, and there's certain codes you have to do as attorneys when you do those kinds of things and disclosure. So he's in a heap of trouble.
Yeah. Do you buy that he shook the FBI's agents' hands as they walked out the door?
I don't know.
Yeah,
is there a video of that?
That's what I wanted to know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. You come raiding my house, I'm not shaking anybody's hand.
Yeah, I don't. I'd have to see a video.
Yeah, me too. Let's move on. The Supreme Court front and center now. Susan Collins saying that she's not going to support a nominee who's going to be, quote, hostile to Roe versus Wade. Do we buy in that?
Well, I think so, but it's going to be irrelevant because we're most likely, I don't want to quote which Democratic senator because I don't know, but I've got suspicions of at least a couple of the Democratic side will vote for a nominee.
Yeah, Manchin, Heitkamp.
Well, yeah, you said it. Okay, anyway. I border West Virginia. I was giving him a break, but Manchin, who my friends say he's not a Democrat, quit saying that, Bob, but Manchin is one, so that'll counter. Now McCain's not there, and then Pence is the tiebreaker. So I think they've got the votes, and Collins, I don't think, unless somebody else starts to defect for some reason.
Any chance Murkowski?
I don't think so. I think Collins would be probably the only one.
All right, so because I've been going, who's going to get thrown under the bus? Because somebody's got to be the sacrificial lamb. It might as well be. I guess it's going to be women. I guess the Roe versus Wade thing is going to be what. And I have Democratic friends who say maybe it's about time. Maybe it's about time that goes by the wayside, and people have to fight for it again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Schumer is taking the tact out front, even above Roe versus Wade. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, as you know, is taking the tact about health care and what will happen with health care. Now, he's doing that because he knows what we all know, which is the premium's going to rise. And so even irregardless of the Supreme Court, Schumer's building the whole case for health care, period.
Yeah, I mean, there was the one area in Maryland that someone told me their rates are going to go up 98%. I'm going, how is that possible?
Well, yes. I mean, the rates, you get a change in your income even. It doesn't have to go too far up. If your income, for example, about a year ago, let's say, I think in the last year, if it went up from, say, 24,000, I think, if it went up to 40-some, which is a large increase, but the rates sometimes jumped from like $25 to $750. Yeah, that's pretty intense.
Wow. I mean, it's just crazy what's going on.
That's 700% or whatever.
Just crazy what's going on. I understand there's might be another Kim Jong-un Trump meeting this time in New York. Are we hearing anything on this?
No, I haven't heard anything on it. I mean, Kim Jong-un probably wants to come here now. At some point, he got so much national or international attention when he was there. I'm not buying into, there's several things I'm not buying into. I'm not buying into the fact that they're starting to increase in the production of a nuclear facility. I kind of don't buy into that. I think that that'll be adjusted if they're doing anything they shouldn't. It's just like the statement on Obama granting citizenship to 2,500 Iranians. I'm not buying into that one either. There was some weird things that have been going down. Rudy Giuliani was with a group called the MEK, the Mojahedin Cult. And Rick, in my book Sideswipe, which I came out with in 2013, I write in a chapter, MEK, the terrorists amongst us. He was over there at that conference. This was the group that took our hostages in our embassy. And all of a sudden now, information, I think, was probably told to some Iranian ancient clerics that Obama granted citizenship. They came out with a story. Even Fox News, even the Fox News analyst said she doesn't believe it. So, all these weird things are going down, and I just think it's a lot of fingers out there trying to.
Yeah, and how much of it is the misinformation campaigns that just want war? How much is the John Boltons of the world who just want to see things go off?
John Bolton was involved with this Mojahedin cult group also. In fact, he was involved with them when they were still an official terrorist group. And they threw some money around, and they actually hired Rudy Giuliani and Howard Dean, and paid them $150,000 each, and Andrew Card, Bush's former chief of staff, and they threw money all around. And now this group's still out there, and they're fermenting war. Is what they're doing. That's exactly what they do, and they have been supported by the Cheney and neocon types.
I mean, all of this talk, all of this stuff, really concerning to me. Because there's so many voices out there that seem to just let's start blowing stuff up.
Well, even with North Korea, I'm not buying into all that right now. I think there's people that look. I don't like Kim Jong Un. I mean, he's unbalanced and he did things to his people. But sometimes we have to deal with people that we don't like. But I still say that the industrial complex war machine group, once stuff starts to at least in any way calm down, they want to stir it back up because that's their job.
Yeah, and look, we're even starting trouble with people we've never had problems with before. I don't know if you saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders today. Basically warning Canada. I guess Trump's after Canada. She said, we've been very nice to Canada for many years, and they've taken advantage. They've taken advantage of us, Bob. The Canadians, the nice, our friendly neighbors to the north, they've been screwing us, Bob.
Well, of course, I do like the tariff stuff. I think I'm not afraid of a tariff war personally.
Me either.
I do like the tariff stuff. And now, the Republicans have a dilemma. Look, what did you hear about the tariff things today from any of the conservative Republicans? You didn't hear anything because they can't interfere with what Trump's doing. They hate it. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Koch brothers came out today and announced they're going to spend a ton of money against the president over this issue. But most of the Republicans are keeping quiet because, Trump's resonating with a certain amount of people on this tariff deal.
And some Democrats.
Well, sure. I mean, look, Bernie Sanders, and you all know your state, my state. Bernie Sanders, if he was the nominee, would most likely have won Pennsylvania, I think, over Trump. Hillary weakened herself on these trade deals, and it hurt in some of the states.
Yeah, because I've asked, now that the election's well over and you don't have a choice now, I go, did you really believe that Hillary wouldn't pursue TPP? And most honest people that I've met have gone, no, I think she would have. There would have been some caveat. There'd have been something, like Bill Clinton did with NAFTA. They put in some a little bit more stringent labor and environmental rules without any teeth, but they put something in. Gave it the old, we tried. And I think Hillary would have done the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be interesting to see. But I saw that today, and I'm like, I guess maybe war with Canada is on the table as well, because they're going to be mean to us.
You never know.
Scary stuff. Bob, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
As always, good to talk to our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working on the talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show. Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
So it looks like the Department of the Treasury has removed a whole bunch of mentions of climate change from their unpublished sustainability report that was prepared for 2017, the E&E News Report. Now you've got the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. They're the people who are saying they're the one who researched the rise in risk to workers and things on the job. They've removed climate change from a lot of their websites, according to the Environment Governance and Data Initiative. You knew this was coming, with someone like Scott Pruitt as the head of the EPA, who they've scrubbed a bunch of stuff about climate change. You knew this administration was going to be the anti-climate change people. You knew that they were going to scrub as much as possible. And right from the start, they had done it. They'd shut websites down and done a bunch of stuff. So it's not shocking. It's not surprising. It's none of that stuff. And, to me, at some point, we, the people who showed up on Saturday, the people who still care about the future of this country, had better come to grips on the reality that things are changing. And how we deal with that going forward is dangerous. Because this head in the sand stuff is going to be deadly down the road. Not just costly, it's going to be deadly. We've done nothing on our coastal areas to prepare for what's coming. We've done nothing. So Superstorm Sandy, more hurricanes, more disaster capitalism. And at some point, when do you answer those questions? When do you begin to push back? I look at these these deniers, and I'll tell you, it's scary times. Most certainly scary times. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Propane Jane's going to be here to share some of her thoughts. If you missed any of the program thus far, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast. For stations listening who only pick up the first hour, head on over to thericksmithshow.com for hour 2. For everyone else, stick around. Right back after this.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
Get ready, America. Here we go to war. Generalissimo Trump, who's known to guerre as El Donaldo, the mucho macho presidente of the USA, is personally directing the hostilities in this assault on, surprise, the USA. Well, not every American. He's specifically mounting a war on our country's poor people, though he euphemistically calls it a war of liberation. The purpose, he says, is to, quote, free poor families from food stamps, Medicaid, housing assistance, and America's other programs that alleviate poverty. Welfare, he snarls, as he and his militant lieutenants conduct ruthless slash-and-burn forays to defund and destroy such benefits. Their rationale is that eliminating anti-poverty assistance will not only save billions of tax dollars and reduce the federal budget deficit, but it'll also provide a moral incentive for poor people to get jobs and work their way up to prosperity, like El Donaldo and his billionaire buddies did. Actually, Trump inherited a real estate fortune from his daddy Fred, and he expanded it by relying on billions of dollars in government subsidies, tax breaks, and special favors. As for working, most poor people already have jobs, but the miserly pay of those jobs mire them in poverty and drudgery. Even more significant, the vicious, laissez-faire land sense of moral superiority possessed by pampered political elites like Trump lead them to be intentionally cruel to the poor. This is Jim Hightower saying he, his cabinet of multimillionaires, and such coke-headed congressional ideologues as GOP House Speaker Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are so disdainful of the needy that they have a perverse impulse to punish them, as though being poor is not punishment enough. It's said that war is hell, but their war on the poor is truly satanic.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Rebels away. Though heavy our hearts shall always be. No ball or chain, no prison shall keep where the rebels of the sacred heart. I said no ball or chain, no prison shall keep where the rebels of the sacred heart.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So if you saw the big story this morning, Michael Cohen, was that the shot heard across the bow? Was that, hey, I'm willing to testify? Or was that, hey, get my pardon ready? Which side of that divide do you find yourself? Michael Avenatti, the Stormy Daniels lawyer, not buying any of it, saying, if you had information and you really cared about country first, you would bring it out. You would be doing it already. And it's an interesting point. But here to share some of her thoughts on, this, that, other stuff, the weekend's marches, Trump's insanity, Cohen, the whole 9 yards. I've asked our good friend Propane Jane to come back with us. Propane Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So, divide. Which side? Are we on the CYOA or, hey, please help me?
He's definitely sending mixed messages. And I think he's hedging, which is essentially what everyone in the Republican Party is doing, because there's a part of him that really has no loyalty to Trump. As he explicitly said, his first loyalty is to his family and to his country, quote unquote. But then at the same time, I think he's aware that Donald Trump is someone who demands, feigned loyalty at the very least, and that has no loyalty to him, though, and that will stab him in the back and throw him under the bus as soon as it becomes convenient for him. And so, though there may be a part of him that feels like, okay, I've been his lawyer, we have all these secrets together, I'm holding all these secrets for him, ultimately, you know, I could just take my chances and hope that he can pardon me. But he doesn't necessarily know that that's going to be something that is allowed to happen. And if the scope of the investigation is going to actually remove that power from Trump altogether, and then just everybody goes down. So I think he's in between a rock and a hard place. I don't envy the decision that he has to make.
Yeah. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that he's screwed over the years who are just gleeful at his comeuppance.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, think about all the people that he strong-armed and that he threatened, and so many of the people that he wronged in service of Donald Trump. And, you know, I would imagine that based on just the sheer volume of documents that were obtained from the raid on his property and his offices, that they probably have the ability to really, you know, pin him down on some things that may not even be related to the Russia probe itself, but that they're using that for leverage against him. And so that's kind of making it to this fever pitch where he's sort of being put on the spot to make a decision.
Yeah, one of the questions that I keep coming back to and keep thinking about is, you know, this investigation, like these investigations do, can go just about anywhere. I go back to, you know, the Clinton era, and started off as a money losing land deal, ended up being about a stain on a blue dress. You know, what happens if in the process of going through and going after Cohen and going after a bunch of these people, they find that Trump is just guilty of of thousands of crimes outside of this is where all the secrets are. This is the depository of felonious activity potentially. What happens if we now find out about all of the stuff that he's done from the beginning of time?
Right, and I think that that's also a big risk with the Mueller probe and him getting a hold of his financial records, and how far he was requesting to dig back. I mean, he was trying to get back to at least the early 2000s, and so is part of the reason why the investigation is taking so long. Is that it's like those little nesting dolls. Every time they open one, there's something else inside of there.
You mean the Russian dolls?
I didn't want to say it, but I mean it's so apt, right?
It fits.
It's poetic. I mean, but yeah, I mean they're the Russian nesting dolls. I mean every time they open one, there's another one underneath it, and it just keeps going and going and going. So I really wouldn't be surprised, particularly when it comes to money. And how he's moved money around for all of his time that he's been in business and in the public eye. He's done so much stuff that I think is questionable. How much his real wealth is. I mean, that's still in question. How much is he in debt to not only banks here, but potentially, Russia or oligarchs that are in Russia.
Or Saudi or Saudi
right,
banks,
yeah.
or who knows? You're right. And maybe he could even become a Trivial Pursuit question. They never got Capone for anything other than tax evasion. Maybe that's what they get Trump on.
Exactly. I mean, it could very well be that. And all this time that people have been, propping him up and saying, well, we want him there because he's a businessman. Well, actually, what does it take? What does it entail? What made him this, alleged great businessman that all these people think he is? Even something like Trump University obviously should have made that very apparent.
Yeah. No, look, all during 2016, I was asking people, what is it you like about him? They say, oh, he's a businessman. I'm going, yeah, he's a businessman that screws everybody, including the taxpayer. Look, as a country, you can't go and do what he did. You can't bankrupt the country and then go, oh, let's file bankruptcy protection from our creditors. You just can't do that.
Right.
I guess you could, but you would then send the world into a global calamity. There'd be global depression. There'd be, well, who knows? We're probably on the brink of the next world war, thanks to this guy. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, but this is like, saying that Mexico's going to pay for the wall.
You mean they're not? I just had a guy the other day tell me Mexico's going to pay for the wall. Eventually, Donald from them.
Not going to happen. And he's the type to still go forward with it and still build it and then just take that money from somewhere else. And so I think that that's just a function of how he does quote unquote business. That's standard operating procedure for him. And though the private world has been enough of a casino that he's been able to get away with it, right? Because obviously we don't have that much regulation on what these people do, the one percenters do behind closed doors. But now that he's trying to bring that into the public sector in the White House, it's open to so much more scrutiny. And so ultimately the karma of it all is that he brought that on himself by even running for president in the first place.
Yeah, and still, I have someone who reminds me that they think he never wanted to win.
Yeah, I believe that.
It was all about just, more brand recognition, more selling stuff. That's what it was really about. And we, a number of us in this country were dumb enough to go, duh, okay.
Yeah, and I think that not only that, but when you have this cyber attack and you have actual hacking into the election systems themselves, all you need is that candidate that's going to get out, the standard votes from the Republican side so that it's, a match, basically.
So do you think that they changed votes? Do you think we're going to find out it went that far that they were able to hack into our system and change the votes?
I think that if they were able to get into the system, why wouldn't they? I think for them to say, okay, we know that all these different voting systems in all these different states have been compromised in some way, without them really fully saying to what extent they've been compromised, none of them can really dutifully say, we know that they didn't change vote totals. I mean, there's been a question about these electronic voting machines even well before the 2016 election.
I've been one of them asking about it.
Me too.
When you had Willie O'Dell, the guy who was, the head of one of, I forget the ES&S or something, or whatever it was, in Ohio, saying that we're going to guarantee victory for George W. Bush. And he's the guy who's making the machines.
Yeah.
You're right. There was a lot of questions there. But let me ask you this then, because if that's true, does Mueller let that out? Do the powers to be let that kind of information out, knowing that we're going to freak out because we'll have no faith in our electoral system. We'll have no faith in the sanctity of that ballot box. Do you think that's something they keep secret or something that they have to bring forth?
I think they don't know the answer to that question yet. I mean, I think if you, I don't know if you remember back to. There was an intelligence briefing of the members of the intelligence community, the committee in the Senate, and Senator Feinstein walked out, or a couple of the senators walked out, and I mean, their faces were just ashen. I mean, they looked like they had literally just seen a ghost. And I still don't think to this day we've been told what was divulged in that meeting that had all of those senators looking that way and sounding so gravely dismayed by what they had just heard. And so, I think that as a country, this is something that's unprecedented. And I don't think that any of the powers that be know how to break that to not only just our society, but also the world. I mean, what is the world going to think if they see that, okay, yes, America is acknowledging that their whole presidential election was compromised?
Yeah, you had basically a coup here in this country.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that's just, how do you wake up the next day from that?
Right, yeah. And I think even beyond that, even if it's not to that extent, we already know that we have Republican-led, Supreme Court-sanctioned dismantling of the Voting Rights Act. And so we've had, at least if you look at a state like Wisconsin, they threw 200,000 people completely off of the roll. And so, if it wasn't on one side the hacking from Russia, it was the complete disenfranchisement of whole sects of the population.
Yeah, but that's not new. I mean, they've been doing that since, that's been
For
good
sure.
stuff since 2000 when we were kicking black people off the rolls in Florida.
Well, for sure. And I think that what's most significant is that this is obviously the first election we've had since 2013, since, Chief Roberts initiated this dismantling of the Voting Rights Act that actually allowed these states to go forward with all of this voter ID and all of these purges. And now, obviously, Ohio is, going to just start kicking you off if you haven't voted in a while. So they're doing all of these things as a means to take people completely out of the voting population. And so I think even beyond just the hacking aspect from a foreign adversary, there's really just a real assault on voting rights in this country and our whole democratic system that we have to account for as well.
Yeah, and to highlight what you were saying about Feinstein and the, it's amazing to me. There was a report just today that the Senate Intelligence Committee is still in contact with this Christopher Steele, who wrote the dossier, and evidently they've been in weekly contact with him. And you go, if there wasn't something there, and look, outside of the Golden Shower stuff, which you believe or don't believe, I don't know. Outside of the really salacious stuff, everything that they claim was in that was accurate.
Yeah, I mean, this is the juiciest nothing burger ever made.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
for
true.
them to call it nothing, it's just been going on and on and on and on and on. And so I think that there are most certainly, I obviously make a habit of having these really long threads that at this point I have some that have gone on, all the way back to 2015 in some cases. But even as the intelligence was kind of coming in around the time of the election, there are reports from, intelligence agencies overseas, like in the UK, where they had intercepted certain communications, and they had actually reached out to, the agencies here in America, like, hey, by the way, this is even what's going on. I mean, this is why Hillary was saying the things she was saying to him during the debate about his questionable contacts with Russia already. So I think that it was a well-known thing behind the scenes, but just nobody really anticipated that was really ultimately going to happen.
No, it was most certainly known behind the scenes. In fact, it was front and center at the Democratic convention. I talked to, a number of people who were saying, the story you got to be paying attention to as this is unfolding is all of this Russia stuff, with Manafort and his Ukrainian ties and, all of these people that they're bringing in, Roger Stone and, Carter Page and all of these people who were at the Republican convention that I was front and center with. All of these things, you were looking at this going, could this possibly be, because I was asking at the time, is it possible that the Russians are really behind all this and really pushing all this stuff? And now as we look, in hindsight, yes.
Yeah. I mean, everything that's come out. I mean, Manafort is locked up right now.
As he should be.
Of all the chance of, lock her up, I mean, this is ultimately, what has happened. There are actual Trump affiliates who are locked up right now and have pleaded guilty to the charges against them.
Which makes me ask the question, Flynn pled guilty, right?
I thought he did.
Why is it? Has he served jail time yet?
I don't think he has, and I think he's like campaigning for people and stuff.
Yeah, that's the guy I want near my campaign.
I mean, but, I think on that side, there are people who are rabid enough to see him, as we talked about last week, as a martyr.
Yeah, I have an uncle like that who sent me an email saying, he spent all this time in the military and, he was a hero and all this stuff. And this is how we treat him. I go, but he pled guilty.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's something that, they see as either he was forced to do it or he really, that it's something that he did not bring upon himself in any way. There's no kind of accountability or responsibility expected of these people. So, I think that anybody who goes down for this, they're going to always have a ready-made explanation for how that person was mistreated or persecuted somehow.
No, you're right. I wanted to ask you about the weekend. Did you get to participate in one of the marches across the country?
I did not, unfortunately. I was not able to go. I actually had to work on Saturday. So.
And it was stinking hot.
Well, especially here in Houston. But I'm really glad to see the turnout. I don't necessarily know in terms of what it's going to do in terms of the policymakers. I think it still remains to be seen if they even hear us. or if they even care.
Don't care.
Yeah, or if they're just sort of like, we'll settle all this in November.
In fact, I think Trump likes it so much that this is what he's getting what he hoped for, which is that chaos and that tension and that division to keep the base all tingly in the panties and the rest of us, at odds.
Yeah, and I think what he's done, at least today, his first day back in the office, quote unquote, after his golf retreat, after his executive time, is to really, I think, use the footage and the commentary from various leaders in the Democratic Party, also people who are potential contenders for 2020, and to use that against them. He's out here on Twitter attacking Kamala Harris and a number of the women senators, and saying that they sponsor MS-13, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that anyone, I think it's pretty obvious that, again, taking that side of civility for us isn't necessarily engendering any civility from them, and they're going to continue to keep vilifying people who are just standing up for basic human rights.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting to me is I'm against the idea of ripping children away from their families and all of that.
Yeah, me too.
But the right wing, the talking points, and to be honest, there's some validity to the talking points. That as policymakers, you don't, and as people marching in the streets, you don't see people marching in the streets for homeless children or for minority children and stuck in crummy school districts, and that stuff. And there's they're right. I mean, this is where you give them credit, but the question I ask is where were you yesterday? Where were you when the policies that Trump and Republicans have been going after for years have made those situations worse? Where were you then?
Yeah, and where did you stand when there was an opportunity to actually prevent all of this from happening? Because I think it's one thing to protest and be out in the streets, but that's kind of a two-part process. You have to protest, but then you have to actually vote too, because otherwise you just end up being a perpetual protester.
Right.
And that's not to say that I don't love a good protest. But ultimately, when it comes down to how legislation is getting passed, they still have the majority. And so until we can actually change from, inside the system, a lot of our protests are still going to fall on deaf ears. So we really have to follow through at the ballot box.
No, I'm right there with you. But what do you say to that? Because, there's some truth to that. We haven't done enough for homeless children. We haven't done enough for minority kids who are stuck in horrible situations, for people who are here. Is this a valid argument? Is this a valid dividing point? Because look, it's meant to tear us apart, and it's meant to destroy the resolve of people who want to keep families together and do all that stuff. But it is accurate.
Well, it's sort of like the all lives matter argument. That once Black Lives Matter came out and said, hey, there's a disparity here, and we're protesting in regards to this particular disparity, and then the quote-unquote all lives matter type people saying, well, all lives matter, and taking offense to the idea that Black lives matter too. And so this idea of, okay, well, shouldn't we be out protesting for everybody? Well, This is an atrocity that's happening in particular to one group of specified people, and that group of specified people is under the most heated attack right now, and so there has to be an ability to be intersectional and to understand that obviously we can't throw all the balls up in the air and catch all of them. We have to sort of do this in terms of most pressing need. And I just think right now, we could literally have a protest every single day, and there could be a different one for every single day.
Because there are that many things that are wrong. You're right.
Yeah, but ultimately, is a protest every day going to speed up the process of any of these people in Washington doing anything meaningful for change?
No.
is the only thing. Exactly. I mean, the only thing ultimately that's going to speed that up is getting some people in there that actually want to make meaningful change in a good way, instead of just rolling back all of the most recent advances of the 20th century.
Well, and look, the recent advances, the entire 20th century is going to be wiped out here very soon anyway, because Trump's going to be able to appoint another Supreme Court justice, which, kiss Roe v. Wade goodbye, kiss a lot of the civil rights stuff goodbye, kiss, same-sex marriage goodbye, kiss a lot of that stuff, gone in the past. And I asked my Democratic friends who, this has been their only issue, their purity issue for candidates. And you go, now that it's going to be all gone, what do you fight for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have devolved to a point where what we are fighting for right now is just basic civil and human rights, and live personhood, like out of the womb, real live adult or child person that is in this world, that is either being killed or sickened by poisoned air and water, or is being put in internment camps and separated from their families, or is being shot down in the streets by the police. There's all these different, I think, groups that are really under pretty imminent attack. I mean, the other thing we don't really think about when we think about the Supreme Court is them also rolling back. I mean, think how many people have been married who have had same-sex marriages for the last couple of years. And what is the Supreme Court going to try to do to them?
Instant divorce.
Yeah. And so this is, people thought we were being hyperbolic when we said, no, this isn't a time for your purity. This isn't a time for you to do this symbolic protest vote and be cute and sit at home. This is really a time where, our civil rights are on the line, and these laws that, are under scrutiny in the Supreme Court, I mean, this could change things for the next 25, 50 years even. So, people just don't take any of this seriously. Like my dad says, people don't believe fat meat is greasy. And, it really, unfortunately, has to happen right before their very eyes for them to recognize just the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, or it has to happen to them. Last question. Any thoughts that there's a chance of someone sane coming out of this, or are we expecting someone to the extreme of Gorsuch?
No, I think whoever it is going to be extreme. I don't put it past Trump to in a cynical way, nominate a person of color or a woman, somebody who belongs to a historically marginalized group, but that is also just a rabid Trump person underneath it all, like when it comes down to ideology and how they would actually decide these cases. But that he would do that to sort of say, to the naysayers, well, no, this person meets this sort of, quota for diversity, so they can't be a this and they can't be a that. And so this is a great choice to try to pin somebody, pin Democrats in to like this is somehow a reasonable choice that isn't really as radical as they are in real life.
No, I was expecting an African-American woman. Just to throw that out there.
Like Diamond or Silk.
Yeah. There you go. There's the perfect choice. The two of them. You could put them both on the court. They'd have one vote because, it's a lot of work, but the two of them, because they kind of act in tandem. There you go. There's a perfect choice. And with this Senate, who knows? They'd probably confirm them.
Yeah, they could. I mean, anything could happen at this point. I mean, or he could just go with a standard white guy. I mean, that obviously could happen, and it wouldn't be a shocker.
Maybe someone from Fox News. Maybe
exactly.
Not Napolitano's too old. So is that Jeanine Pirro, too old. They're going to want somebody much, much younger. She's like 67 years old.
I've heard people say Ted Cruz.
Lee from Utah is actually on the list, who I'm actually pulling for, because if he's being considered, he's not a vote, which lowers the number of votes we need to keep him off the court.
Well, yeah, and I'm sort of like, how can I get rid of Ted Cruz? But I don't necessarily.
What you do is you work for Beto O'Rourke and you throw him the hell out.
That, of course. But, you know, I just thought that was so funny. It gave me, but we're going to beat him the real way, straight up.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
Jane, I appreciate the time. It's always fun, always interesting, and always enlightening talking with you. Thanks so much.
You too. Have a great week.
You as well. Good stuff. Our good friend Propane Jane. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Me and my people are through. Me and my people are ready. Me and my people are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
We will vote to confirm Justice Kennedy's successor this fall.
Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy's retirement is bad news for the climate.
For the people who live here, there's nothing to come home to. Burned to scrap and ash.
New wildfires hit Northern California and 5 other states. Federal judge dismisses San Francisco's climate liability lawsuit. Plus,
when we decide to take action, the world by default gets better.
Bright spots in the primaries as progressive climate hawks win upset victories.
All of that upset and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Nature is not a political game.
It is now, Governor Brown, and the bad guys just rolled Yahtzee. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, lots of concerns about whoever the replacement may be for Justice Anthony Kennedy, and, of course, concerns about the climate along with it.
Yep. Kennedy's retirement from the U.S. Supreme Court is an ominous development that could bring about sweeping changes to both U.S. environmental law and the federal government's authority to address climate change. So it's potentially bad not just for the nation, but for the planet and future generations because of the need to act on climate right now. Justice Kennedy's record was pretty positive overall on environmental protection. He was the crucial 5th vote in the landmark ruling Massachusetts versus EPA, which upheld the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to regulate the greenhouse gases that cause dangerous climate change. A more conservative Supreme Court could overhaul established public health protections like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and even the Endangered Species Act. And significant climate policy and pollution lawsuits are now headed to the U.S. Supreme Court, like President Obama's Clean Power Plan that set the first ever carbon emission standards for power plants. Bottom line, adding another anti-environment, anti-regulation, right-wing justice like Neil Gorsuch to the bench will likely push the court to further restrict the scope of federal authority and limit environmental justice.
You know, I wish I had a snarky comment here, but I really don't.
I don't blame you. Speaking of justice, a climate liability lawsuit against major oil companies that was brought by the cities of San Francisco and Oakland was dismissed by a federal judge this week. The cities were seeking damages to pay for the costs and impacts of rising sea levels. In his ruling, District Court Judge William Alsup called the dangers of climate change, quote, very real, and noted that the fossil fuel companies did not dispute that burning their products causes global warming. But he said that it is a global problem that requires a global solution beyond the court's power to provide, and said that Congress and the executive branch must solve it.
Oh, well, that should go very well.
So ExxonMobil, BP, and Chevron escaped blame for those public costs, but other ongoing climate liability lawsuits continue to wend their way through state and local courts.
So this is just one judge who turned down this suit. Other judges may see it completely differently?
That's correct.
Of course, if they do, those cases, I suspect, will go all the way to the Supreme Court, and then they'll die.
We'll just have to see.
Too cynical?
Meanwhile, 4 new wildfires have erupted in Northern California amid high winds and high temperatures, including one less than 20 miles away from the catastrophic and deadly Wine Country fires last fall that obliterated entire neighborhoods. The Pawnee Fire has already destroyed homes and forced thousands to evacuate. It is Lake County, California's 4th major wildfire in just 4 years. A new study concludes that U.S. oil and gas drillers are leaking far more methane than previously estimated by the federal government, some 60% more. Led by the Environmental Defense Fund, the study, published in the journal Science, estimates that about $2 billion worth of natural gas is lost to leaks every year in the United States, enough to heat 10 million homes. Because methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, it has a big impact on climate change. But the good news, the authors say, is that most of the leakage can be stopped at relatively low cost to industry. Finally, there is a bright spot of good news.
I'll take it.
Progressive climate hawk candidates scored upset victories in 2018 primary elections this week. In Utah, Navajo Kenneth Maryboy unseated incumbent Rebecca Benally for San Juan County Commissioner. Benally supported the Trump administration's gutting of the Bears Ears National Monument boundaries against the wishes of the majority of Navajo tribal members in the state.
And the voters tossed her out?
Yes, they did.
Good for them.
And in the New York primary, progressive candidate and climate hawk Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won the Democratic nomination for House District 14 against longtime incumbent Democratic Representative Joe Crowley. Ocasio-Cortez calls for transitioning the nation to 100% renewable electricity by 2035.
Go Alexandria. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and please share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Hold your head up. Hold your head up. Hold your head up. Hold your
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we bang. The Rick Smith Show.
So it was quite an amazing weekend. Look, I mean, when you get several hundred people out into the Capitol here in Pennsylvania, it's a big thing. And there were people of all ages, all races, all you name it. There were folks out there saying that fundamentally, as a core value, families belong together. Whether you agree that there should be open border immigration or we need tighter control. The minimum that people were saying is, look, what we're doing is flat dead wrong. And here to share some thoughts on the weekend's marches. I'll also talk about, what's going on and the arguments that we're seeing back and forth. I've asked Hassan Ahmad to come talk with us. He's an immigration lawyer and activist. Hassan, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Rick.
So did you get to participate on Saturday in one of the events across the country?
I did. I drove out to D.C. with 2 of my children, my 2 older children, and my sister and her 2 kids, and we decided to go down there and be a part of it.
And I'm sure it was an amazing event. I know in Harrisburg it was just an incredible moment of of people saying, look, this isn't who we are. And I think as a country, it's important for the world to see this isn't who we are.
Absolutely. It was one of those times when I deal with the immigration agency and horrific stories of families being ripped apart and uncertainty and despair every day. And for me, it was just great to go and just see people wanting to be normal and just wanting to be people and wanting to stand up for something good and wholesome. Families. I mean, that's where it all begins. It's the building block of society, of any society. And so for our government to be espousing this way of ripping them apart, this cannot be who we are. We cannot allow ourselves to succumb to this.
Especially the people who tell us that they're the party of family values. And the thing that's interesting to me is the number of people who have attacked this movement and have attacked people who participate in this as somehow, contributing to child trafficking, somehow helping MS-13. It just seems kind of despicable on one vein, but more political opportunism on the other. I did want to get your thoughts though, because one of the common talking points is that these aren't really children of parents. They're not really snatching kids from their mother's bosoms or out of their father's arms. These are kids who are going to be child trafficked into this country because the gang members are coming, Hassan, and they're coming for you and they're your children and everything you hold dear.
Yeah, I've been practicing immigration law for about 15 years, and in that time, I've seen all number of excuses for robbing people of due process. And so, what does this have to do with due process? Well, here's what it is. When the government wants to take away someone's rights, the first thing they need to do is to have a convenient label to apply to the unwanted person or unwanted community, so that they can do with them what they wish, without having to give them a hearing, without having to give them, an opportunity to tell their story, without even bothering to verify the facts. We saw this with the Muslim community. That we've got the terrorism label, and in the Latino community, it's the gang label. And I could tell you stories. I had a client once a number of years ago who reported on gang activity, and reported these three other gang members to the cops. They all got arrested. They all got charged. They all got convicted. And if they're not still serving their sentences, then they all got removed from the United States. And the next day, ICE came and said, "Well, you must have had an affiliation with them, so we're going to put the label gang member on you as well." Wow. I mean, there's no way to fight it. Luckily, we had a good judge, and it still took me 2 months of litigation to get him out of detention. But the guy reports gang activity, and there's just no way to challenge it. They just put down in some record somewhere that this person is a known gang member, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, as soon as you're labeled, it's all over. But you talk about due process, and I've thrown this out as well. The response back is always, "Well, that's for Americans, Hassan. Only Americans get due process, not these illegals coming in here across our borders."
Yeah, unfortunately, the law disagrees with that. So there is due process that is due. There is process that is due, rather, to undocumented people. And the bottom line is, legalities aside, do we really want to be a country that just takes away people's rights and doesn't even want to bother to listen to their side of the story? That's all due process is the ability, the chance to give principle that people should have a chance to tell a side of the story before we do something and send them in potentially harm's way or take away some rights for them. That's it. And I agree, it can get messy, it can get time-consuming, and there's lawyers involved, et cetera, but how else are you supposed to dispense justice? And, when they talk about Sessions and his minions are talking about robbing due process and making the system go faster and operations streamline and making things, yeah, that's really scary. That is not what America is about.
No, it's scary on so many levels when you have an authoritarian leader like we have, and their disdain for the court system, their disdain for due process. And it's easy to give up for people who you believe shouldn't be entitled to have those rights. It goes back to the old Pastor Niemöller, quote, first they came for the trade unionists and I said nothing.
Exactly.
And, they came for the Jews and I said nothing. And they came for the communists and I said nothing. And then they came for me and there's nobody left. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we have to zealously guard due process. The southern border of the United States is one of the most due process free zones that we have in this country. And the fact that it's still not, deporting people fast enough for this administration is sick.
So let me go back to this for a second, because, I want to make sure that I hit on the idea that, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. These kids aren't really, kids of these parents. They're MS-13. Are there documented cases where that's happened? And is it a large percentage? Is it a percentage? Because, nobody, I don't want to be on the wrong side of bringing kids into this, bringing people into this country and have children put into much even worse situations than where they may have come from. And I think a lot of people want to be on the right side of it. How much of that, that claim is accurate? And I'm sure there's got to be a way that we mitigate those kind of risks if we had sane policy. But I'm curious your thought.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is, do we have accurate information about who these people are, who these kids are, who the parents are, and is the government actually, is the Office of Refugee Resettlement, is the Department of Homeland Security and its agencies, are they giving accurate information, or are they actually prone to the political suggestion? How do we know what's going on the border when there is zero transparency coming from the administration? Child trafficking is a concern that should be on all of our minds.
Absolutely.
But the fact of the matter is that when children who can't even speak, nonverbal children, are taken away from parents, and the government can't even tell you where they actually moved them to, and they're pressuring parents to say, okay, we'll reunite you with your child if you withdraw your asylum claim. If you want to stay here, then you're not going to be able to see your child. Therefore, you're putting the child up in some sort of system where you don't know where they're going to wind up. That is going to attract traffickers like moths to a flame. So who's actually when you don't even know what's going on, and you're creating a situation, and I want to stress that this is a man-made crisis. This is something that our government has chosen to do. They didn't have to do it. There was a fragile, system under the Flores settlement. It wasn't perfect, but it was working, and it's been in place since 1997. The government has come under Sessions. The Department of Justice has come and screwed it all up. And with this zero tolerance policy and deciding to send a message to these desperate parents and children who are fleeing all kinds of horrors that you and I can't even imagine, who's actually exposing them to greater risk of trafficking?
Yeah, that's a good
question. That's the question that needs to be. What actually is going on? If we actually had a government and like-minded advocates who would sit down and say, okay, look, we have this problem, we have all these people coming, we need to be able to responsibly, take care of them. Let's find out who they are. Let's have a system in place. They, it's like one of the federal court judges wrote in her opinion from California last week. Every single inmate in the United States at federal, state, and municipal levels, they keep track of inmates' cell phones and their underwear and all kinds of items, and they can be in jail for 30 years and they'll come out and they know exactly where all the prisoners' items are. And you're telling me you don't know where these children are? You can take care of property but not children? I mean, this is where we're at. This is where we're at. The policy wasn't thought through. Nothing was discussed. Nothing was thought through. There was no procedure in place. The government attorney on a settlement conference with the federal court admitted as much and said there was no plan nor procedure for the government to actually reunite these families. And they were the ones that ripped them up in the first place. So who's actually exposing these kids to the danger of trafficking?
That's an excellent point.
The government say, I'm sorry, I can't swallow it.
No, it's an excellent point. But there's part of me that goes, and maybe you'll agree or not, that this isn't about immigration. This isn't about MS-13. It's certainly not about the kids. It's more of a political. It's a political issue designed to divide us even further and to pit us against each other, so that we don't talk about all the other stuff that's going on. It's just more of the chaos fatigue that I think a lot of people are feeling, and I believe they thought this through as this is a great political issue come November.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, immigration is always politically charged, and this administration has managed to charge it even further and make it into this hot button issue. And people stop. This is. Well, I have a lot to say about this, but people who are coming up. Look, I went down to Dilley, Texas in 2016. This was right after the 2014 surge. Dilley, Texas is the site of the South Texas Family Residential Center. It was a detention facility, incarceration facility for women and children. And Obama administration also tried to send this message out that we're going to send a message out. We're going to detain you if you come to the United States. Don't make the journey. It's dangerous. Blah blah blah. I must have spoken to hundreds of women and kids when I was there. Every single day, we would have 4 to 5 waves of people or groups of people, 35 to 40 people each way. So when we do the math, not a single person I talked to said they were coming to the United States or came to the United States to look for work. Nobody came saying, hey, I wanted a job promotion. Every single person I talked to, and I'm saying every single one, had a horrific story. They were raped. They had relatives murdered. Their kids were being forced to join gangs. They were being extorted. Their businesses were shut down. They had to move around the country. They were being abused by a spouse or somebody else. Every single person was fleeing from something, and they had no choice. And this is what we're forgetting about this, is that these are people with real problems. There is something that needs to be done, okay? And building a wall and dropping, keeping people shut out, deporting them back to their death, which is, quite often it happens, is not a workable or sustainable solution. It's only possible when you dehumanize them, and that's what we're seeing.
Right. So and this is where the right loses their mind, because immediately they go to the extreme of, just open the borders and let everybody in. And obviously everybody can't, come flowing in, or can they?
No, I think there obviously has to be reasonable limits. But where you have people who literally have no choice. This is forced displacement. These are people who would stay if they could, but they can't, and they literally have no choice. And there is a responsibility, it is a human right to seek asylum. And what's happening here is that human right is being criminalized, and that's the problem.
Right.
When you come in and you use 8 U.S.C. 1325A for unlawful entry, and you use that as a pretext to separate parents from kids, and then claim that we're not the ones actually doing it, it's the parents that are putting these kids in harm's way. Any parent, their response is what these parents are doing and sending their kids either unaccompanied or coming in with them. It is possibly the most human response I can think of. It's the most human action.
No, I'd be doing it.
Of your kids. Yeah, everybody would.
There's no question about it.
It's the most human thing. It is the most human thing imaginable, and yet they're seen as they're painted as the criminals. That classic abuser mentality, right? You're making us do this to you, right? And that can't be us. We can't allow that to be us.
So last question I've got for you, because nobody wants. I've had people tell me they didn't want to come here. They came for different reasons and whatever. As you pointed out, some of them are life threatening. How do you make conditions in their home countries better and more tolerable? I've argued that, us cutting off foreign aid, the Republicans love to scream about how much we give away in foreign aid, and all that has something to do with it. Is it possible to make these places better? Because who wants to make that trek? Who wants to make that journey to this country that is, from what I've heard, a horrible journey filled with who knows what, when you can make things better at home? Or is it possible?
You could make things better at home. You can make the path easier. You can allow people to come and go. And there's so many different options that if we actually were interested in actually doing this, let's keep in mind. Let's talk about the reason why MS-13 and Barrio 18. These are American gangs. Let's not forget that they came from the United States, and it was the deportation enforcement only policies. Okay, and deportation has its uses, but when it's used like so much candy, when it's a strong medicine, but you make it available over the counter and start deporting everybody, this is exactly what led to the transnational growth of MS-13. It metastasized into this massive cancerous growth that has caused now the near collapse of 3 countries in Central America, and so. Rightfully so. When these people come and they're victimized by these gang members, they have to flee. They have no choice. So part of it is rethinking deportation as a panacea or a cure
towards everything.
Right.
Maybe it's better to keep these gang members in jail where they can't do in the United States where they can't do damage. Maybe that's one thing that we can do. Maybe that foreign aid can be gone out. Maybe you can change our immigration laws to allow people to come, work, and be able to go back. Maybe we could do that instead of putting 3 and 10-year bars to people who have unlawful presence in the United States and making it nearly impossible for them to go back. Right now, the way the laws work, it's like paying somebody to dig a hole and paying someone else to fill it right back up. It gets you nowhere. There's lots of different pieces to the puzzle here. I don't claim to be an expert in fixing everything, but I can tell you that the system that we have now, the immigration system that we have now, it's beyond dispute that it's broken. But what's happening now is that cruelty is being injected into it out of this zeal to just keep people out, as if that's going to solve the problem, the real problems, and it's not.
And I don't expect anything coming out of this Congress or this president positive anytime soon. Hassan, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. I'd love to have you back because this is not going away anytime soon. We can pick this up next time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Rick.
Good stuff. I appreciate it, Hassan Ahmad, immigration lawyer, activist. Thanks so much for your time and your thoughts. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
A union man for the firefighters, my friend. And the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm going to this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists, goodbye.
So again, another issue that a Congress like we have now, something that's never going to be solved. And Hassan is right. The reality is this comes back to bad policy. And so many of us know nothing about MS-13 or any of these gangs that have sprung up, or where they've come from or how they operate. But what you get is people like Trump who are able to use that as fear because they're coming. They're around every corner and they're lurking and they're coming for you. And interestingly enough, everybody I've talked to they've gone to these facilities, they've talked to these people and found that they're just poor working people who are getting screwed. And there's nowhere for them to get help. And I've said it before, if I were on that side of the border, if it were my family, there is no and take on these gangs and that stuff. You have to find that person. And what's interesting to me on a number of levels is that our policymakers just keep using this as a political football. They just keep using this as something to continually divide us, keep us pitted against one another, keep us at each other's throats. And, at some point, maybe we wake up at some point, maybe it gets better at some point. Maybe the people who were out in the street over the weekend, say enough is enough. Maybe at some point. Because this has been an issue we've been debating and going back and forth over for a couple of decades. All during the Bush years. They almost thought they had a deal. They almost didn't. And then it blows up. And it's not like it doesn't even seem like anyone wants to solve problems. And this is where November matters. This is where elections matter. We need to have rules in place. We need to have laws in place. We need to have procedures in place to handle these things, to make sure We're not ripping people apart. I mean, it makes, you're going to tear a 3-month-old child from his mother? Really? The humanity. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like tides flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is color.